Imagine being born into power, fear, and infamy, not because of anything you did, but because of your last name. Albert Francis Capone never chose the world he was born into. He didn't order hits, he didn't run speakeasies, he wasn't part of the Chicago outfit. Yet from the moment he took his first breath, he carried the burden of being the only son of the most feared gangster in American history. But what if I told you that his story is one of quiet pain, hidden identity, and a life spent running not from the law, but from a name? This is the forgotten life of Sonny Capone, the man who tried to outrun his father's shadow and never truly could. Albert Francis Capone, nicknamed Sonny, was born on December 4th, 1918 in Brooklyn, New York. His birth should have been a moment of celebration in the Capone household, but it quickly turned into a tragedy. As an infant, Sonny developed mastoiditis, a severe infection near the ear, which led to partial deafness. Despite Al Capone's wealth, the medical treatments of the time couldn't fully restore his hearing. For the rest of his life, Sonny would struggle with communication and isolation. Even in his earliest years, he was cut off from the world around him, perhaps a cruel foreshadowing of how distant and removed he'd one day feel from society. But what Sonny lacked in hearing, he gained in attention. He was Al Capone's only child, his legacy, his blood. And in the world of organized crime, that meant something. Al may have been a ruthless mob boss to the outside world, but to Sonny, he was simply dad. Photographs from the 1920s show Capone smiling with a young son, cradling him, playing with him, trying at least outwardly to give him a normal childhood. But how normal can life be when your father runs the most powerful criminal empire in America? Even family outings were shadowed by bodyguards. Phone calls were monitored. Mail was intercepted. The Capone household was constantly watched by both allies and enemies. And Sonny, he was just a child, trying to grow up in a world that didn't allow innocence to last long. In public, he had to smile. In private, he had to listen to the whispers, the rumors, the radio broadcasts calling his father a monster. Can you imagine being 8 years old and hearing the nation cheer for your father's arrest? What does a child do with that? He doesn't scream, he doesn't run, he learns to shrink, to become smaller than the weight of his last name. Sonny Capone wasn't a gangster. He didn't break laws or run rackets. He was just a boy, trying to grow up in a world that already made up its mind about him. At school, his name echoed louder than his voice. Some teachers avoided him, some classmates feared him, and others, they were just waiting for him to become what they thought he'd be. He wasn't allowed to be average. He was Capone's kid, and that meant everything he touched was either suspicious or cursed. At home, his mother May tried to protect him from the noise, from the reporters, from the men watching from parked cars outside, from the silence that grew louder each time another newspaper showed his father's face in handcuffs. And his father, behind bars, Al Capone didn't send orders. He sent letters, full of love, of regret, of hope that maybe, just maybe, his son could live free of the shadow he left behind. But how do you outrun a legacy like that? A name can open doors, or it can seal them shut. Albert Francis Capone knew which one he had. That's why he changed it. He became Albert Francis Brown, a name with no headlines, no blood trails, no bullet holes behind it. A name that might finally let him be ordinary. But in America, the name Capone was more than a surname. It was a story, a symbol. And for Sonny, it was a shadow he could never fully leave behind. He didn't just shed a name, he abandoned a destiny. While others chased power, Sonny chased silence. He walked away from a life of wealth, violence, and a name that carried weight. Instead, he chose a world of tire shops, restaurant shifts, and quiet printing presses. Not because he couldn't carry the legacy, but because he never asked for it. He lived in quiet defiance, not of the law, but of legacy. He didn't see the Capone name as a crown. He saw it as a cage built from headlines, sealed with blood, and guarded by ghosts of a past he never asked for. But the world never stopped watching. Tabloids searched for scandal. Federal agents whispered his name in cold hallways. And the underworld, They waited, wondering if the son of Scarface would one day reclaim the throne left behind. He gave them nothing. No scandals, no empire, no bullets, just silence. And in that silence was the loudest rebellion of all. While his father had ruled Chicago, Sonny just wanted to make it to the weekend without hearing his name on someone else's lips. He clocked in, he paid taxes, he ate dinner at the same table every night with the same routine, as if normalcy could somehow erase the weight of the past. But nothing could erase who he was. Even if the world didn't see a gangster, he always saw his father's shadow in the mirror, and sometimes he feared it might see him back. He carried the weight of a name he never asked for, in a world that never let him forget it. Every job interview, every background check, every raised eyebrow when they heard the word Capone. He wasn't just trying to escape a past, he was fighting to protect a future, his own. Because Sonny knew something the world refused to believe, that a name can be inherited, but identity must be earned. And while his father built a kingdom with bullets and fear, Sonny chose to build a life, one quiet, honest day at a time. No headlines, no statues, no legacy carved in marble, just a man who refused to become the story the world had written for him. And in that choice, he became something far rarer than a gangster. He became free. He had distanced himself, changed his name, started a new life. But the past has its own way of knocking. In 1959, Hollywood came calling. The Capone name was once again front and center, not in a courtroom, but on national television. The show was The Untouchables. The producer, Desi Arnaz, a man who years earlier had sat beside Sonny Capone in school. They had shared lunch breaks, dreams, and childhood innocence, before fate sent them down very different roads. Desilu brought Al Capone back to life, but this wasn't the father Sonny remembered. This Capone was larger than life, a monster in pinstripes, a villain of the week. To America, it was entertainment. To Sonny and his mother May, it was a dagger, twisting. They sued, claimed defamation, argued that the Untouchables twisted the memory of a man, a father, into something grotesque. But the courts dismissed it, and the show continued. Desi never called, never explained, never apologized. For Sonny, the pain wasn't just that the world hated his father. It was that someone who once knew them had helped write the hate. The lawsuit failed, the show kept airing, and the world moved on. But Sonny carried the weight of it all, alone. The betrayal, the legacy, the silence. And maybe it wore him down more than anyone ever realized. In 1965, Sonny was arrested for stealing aspirin and batteries. It was minor, but for the media, it was perfect. The last Capone caught shoplifting. The name still sold headlines. He didn't steal to survive. He survived, despite having so much taken from him. His name, his peace, his chance to live in the light. And yet, through it all, he never became what the world expected. Not a monster, not a martyr, just a man, quietly carrying the weight of a name that history would never forget. The headlines faded, the cameras turned away, and Albert Francis Capone, now Albert Francis Brown, faded with them. He moved quietly. No more lawsuits, no more news stories, just a man slowly shedding the weight of a name that once shook the world. He spent his final years in a quiet California town, Auburn Lake Trails. Not exactly where you'd expect a Capone to die, but maybe that was the point. There, he wasn't a mob legacy, he was just Al Brown, a neighbor, a man who kept to himself, rarely spoke of his father, and never sought the spotlight. On July 8, 2004, he passed away. No crime scene, no reporters, just the end of a long, quiet detour from history. His wife, America Amy Francis, later said, "Francis was a man who broke free from the sins of the father." And maybe that's the real legacy. Not bootlegging, not bullets, but the rare story of someone who walked away from power and never looked back.